Greetings to you abominators. It is I, Arthur, the mechanical lackey to these fartmongers you're about to listen to. The Abominations in Technicolor podcast is brought to your ear holes by Audible. Head on over to audibletrial.com/abominationspod. Sign up for free and enjoy a 30-day trial membership with over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Kindle or MP3 player, and you can cancel anytime. That's audibletrial.com/abominationspod. Now onto the bloody wankers. Enjoy the show.
I present to you Abominations in Technicolor.
How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? I don't know! Oh my God!
What killed the dinosaurs? Daisy!
I need a second, okay? Why can't anybody give me a goddamn second? Stop ganging up on me!
Just a little chicken.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Abominations in Technicolor, the podcast where we review the overlooked, underrated, and critically panned films of the past in a new light. My name is Matt Cook, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my brother Adam. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, it's going good. Going good. Back from a little break. Anxious to get back into the swing of the podcast. Hopefully, everyone's still sticking around, ready for another gripping action flick.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. A little bit later on the show, we're going to be diving deep into Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall from 1990. Not that Colin Farrell one from 2012. I never saw that one, so...
I didn't either.
Nope, we're going back to the great year of 1990, so it's going to be a good time. But on the sort of the top side of the show, we wanted to discuss the Detective Pikachu trailer. I think it was the one that came out just a couple of days ago. What are your thoughts on this whole Detective Pikachu movie?
Oh, man.
Now, there's a game, and it's sort of a thing right now, like Pikachu's a detective and whatnot, but
right.
Just the premise of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with... You and I both had the Game Boy Color original Pokemon Game Boy games, and the number of hours spent on that, playing that amazing game. Since then, I've always wanted like a live action, well-made Pokemon movie. And when I first heard about this, like, you know, I was super excited, like, oh man, what's this going to be like? I assume they're always going to have a youthful demographic that they're targeting with these movies. I don't expect it to be like a Christopher Nolan Batman movie.
Yeah.
I expect it to be targeted toward the younger child audience. But at the same time, I thought, you know, maybe we were going to get something for all ages here. And having Ryan Reynolds voice Pikachu is kind of the exact opposite of the thing that I had hoped we would get. So I'm not really looking forward to it. I kind of think this movie is like right in there with movies like Ted, like the bear that can talk with Mark Wahlberg, like that whole thing. Like I just look at it like one of those. Or I think, was it Will Ferrell that did a Garfield movie? If I recall, maybe not. I might be mistaken on that.
No, I don't think so.
These movies with these characters, like, you know, there's probably an audience that wants this movie, but for me, it's just kind of like bittersweet because it's close to something I wanted, but it doesn't seem to be what I had hoped and looked forward to. So I'll continue to wait patiently.
Right. I think it looks kind of charming, and I like the scope of it. Like it looks pretty big in terms of just the scale and the amount of like Pokemon they're throwing into this movie.
Yeah.
I like that, and all the colors and the visuals look great. And seeing a 1-to-1 scale Charizard on screen against like real people looks pretty crazy, and I'm looking forward to that. But the premise of like Detective Pikachu, I'm not really that on board with, and I've never played. There's a game, I think it's out on the Nintendo Switch, or it came out on maybe one of the handhelds a year or two ago. It's sort of like a phenomenon right now, so that's probably why they decided to do it and sort of bank on that. But
strike while the iron's hot to get that money.
Yeah, I sort of consider myself, and I'm not like the biggest Pokemon fan, but I'm still the original 150 purist. You know,
I think that me too.
At this point in time, I don't even know what the count is for how many Pokemon there are. It's got to be pushing 1,000.
Yeah, I think it's like 700-800, something like that, if I recall. But
that's insane.
I lost track a while back.
But a lot of the ones I noticed in the trailers are those part of that original 150, which really excites me.
The OGs.
Yeah. And seeing like I just noticed a Blastoise doing like a 360 tail whip spin or something like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm pretty stoked to see all of that stuff, but just the story and, having Ryan Reynolds voice Pikachu, it's not really something that sells me on the movie. I mean, I think the guy's funny, but is it going to be sort of a clash of brands, I guess? I don't know. It's just something foreign to me, and I'm just having a little bit of a hard time sort of accepting it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think hopefully they can pull it off and we'll all enjoy it.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll watch it. I'll give it a shot. I don't know what the game's like, so maybe it has charm, so we'll see.
But I do want to propose this question to you.
What?
Will we see Team Rocket?
Oh, we better. You can't watch any of the movies or television show without Team Rocket and Meowth.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts about the anime from back in the day is Team Rocket. It sort of reminded me of like a Looney Tunes cartoon, where you have like Wile E. Coyote always trying to get the Roadrunner and always failing epically. So we'll see.
They'll probably do it and then ruin it by getting like Will Arnett and Amy Poehler to do it. Oh
my God. Man, you just took my hopes and dreams and smashed them like throwing a glass at a brick wall.
Hey, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Or it's what Will Arnett does.
Yeah. Yep. But let's move on to the main topic of Total Recall.
And now our feature presentation.
Your mind. It is the center of your life. It is everything you hear, everything you see, everything you feel. It is everything you are. How would you know if someone stole your mind?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Total Recall from 1990. It was a fine year. We also had Home Alone, Dances with Wolves, Kindergarten Cop, and the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, which we covered previously on the podcast. Check that episode out if you like. Total Recall had a pretty good sized budget, $65 million. Performance-wise, it came out around 119 million domestic, 261 million worldwide. So, big movie here. Arnold Schwarzenegger leading the way.
Yeah, I think
Kind
it
of
was the 7th highest grossing film that year.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes shows this one with a nice 82% and an audience score of 78, so a little bit better than some we've covered. But this marks the second Paul Verhoeven film that we've done on the podcast. So recently we did Starship Troopers and other things he did like RoboCop and Basic Instinct. Also Basic Instinct also having Sharon Stone. So some of the cast, you'll see kind of people that are shared amongst some of these movies that Paul Verhoeven does. But Total Recall, what a sci-fi epic! I mean, this is in line with some of the sci-fi push that we saw in the 80s, following movies like Blade Runner and stuff like that. And it's a fun time to be watching movies. And when you combine things like these sci-fi epics and then throw an action star in there like Arnold, I mean, it makes for a pretty entertaining time, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, in this moment in time, we're talking 1990, Arnold Schwarzenegger was one, if not the biggest action stars of that era. Put him up against, along with Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis. Those guys, they went on to create a franchise restaurant in Planet Hollywood.
Yeah,
shortly after,
and we're talking like post Terminator, but pre-Terminator 2, right?
Yeah, yep.
So we're kind of in the heat of it. Post Predator, post Twins, post Running Man, Commando. I mean, these
Predator,
Conan the Destroyer. Yeah, Predator. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you're right. It's right in line. I mean, I always looked at his career like nothing is bigger than Terminator 2. I don't know. It's just like, for some reason, that like James Cameron production in that movie, just, I feel like that's like the top of Everest is where you're at when you look at the scale and the success of Terminator 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
But, yeah. So this movie, though, Total Recall, at least I remember as a kid, like, this is like the action movie that you're not allowed to watch. And and I remember seeing bits and pieces of it and not really knowing like what the hell was going on. This movie is so complex and such a mind, I don't know. This thing just is like blows your mind. And I think like now watching it, it's a little dated at times. So it doesn't quite, the special effects and all don't quite blow your mind the way they probably did back in 1990. But I do remember like some of the things like the what's the guy's name? Is it a Jimmy Cab? The robotic cab driver.
Oh, yeah, I believe so.
The girl with the 3 boobs and when he's getting tested and all of that at the beginning, or they're not the testing, but they're doing the implant and all of that. Like, some of this stuff is just such cool sci-fi material that sticks with you over the years, but I don't remember any of the context of the film. So to go back and watch it all of this stuff in the context of such a complex plot line, it's a pretty cool movie. But it is very much like some of the other Paul Verhoeven movies that we've seen, and I don't know, he definitely has a signature style, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't really grow up watching this. I probably didn't watch it all the way through up until like 5 years ago or something like that. And I mean, I'd maybe seen bits and pieces of it, but I don't know where I would have seen it, because I remember this movie being the movie with the alien girl or mutant or whatever.
Yeah.
The alien with the 3 boobs. That's how I remembered this movie. But I didn't
feel
really
like
remember anything else about it.
I feel like the only part I saw was when, like, right from the part where he arrives at Mars, and you're just seeing all this Martian culture of all these mutants and all that stuff. And I feel like after that, I remember nothing before it, and I remember nothing after it.
Right.
So I must have, like, our dad must have been watching it, and I walked in during that time, saw a little bit of it, and he said, "You can't watch this," and then I had to leave. It has to be the only explanation for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a trip, man. Like, and I think the filmmakers sort of view it as this, but it's like the thinking man's action movie, you know? It's not your stereotypical Arnold movie. It's not Predator, where you can just watch Arnold or a couple of the other guys just unleashing on guerrilla warfare in the jungle or trying to take out a predator. But it's layered, it's complex, like you said, and it's kind of just a wacky, zany sci-fi adventure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we've, talking about Starship Troopers being like something that was drawn from a book and then put into a movie, but not really like, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It goes out there and just tries to be this like popcorn flick with all these like outrageous, gory action, over the top sequences. And that's like what Paul Verhoeven does. And in this one, it's no different. Like, he takes a short story by Philip K. Dick, who also wrote stories that eventually turned into Blade Runner and Minority Report, and kind of used the story, the premise, and built this, like, I don't know. I don't think the world building's fantastic, but I think he just took something that had a good amount of complexity and premise and everything else, and made a nice exciting action movie around it. So, yeah, I don't know. Whether it's great or not, that's debatable, I think.
Well, those other 2 movies that you mentioned, they do have just it not only. I mean, it's hard to sort of create world building on a short story, but I'm sure the guy, he really got into like the minds of these characters and just coming up with these science fiction concepts. And Total Recall, like we said at the beginning of the show, I've never seen the 2012 version with Colin Farrell, but like, I've never really seen another sort of science fiction action movie that's kind of like this. It's pretty much the only thing like it. So I don't know, I've never really seen anything that I could say, oh, that was just like Total Recall. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of would be The Matrix, that kind of
a little bit
tries to go in such an ambitious direction, like, and I'm only comparing it to that just because of the way that he like has that implant procedure. They knock him out and then he wakes up in a cab, like the way that Neo kind of like goes through that process of going in that room and getting that thing in his belly, and then wakes up in his bed the next day like it was all a dream. Like, that's kind of the only one that really gave me, and it's just a scene, like comparing a scene to a scene. But I'd agree. I think Total Recall's its own kind of, it's definitely has its own signature stamp on Hollywood sci-fi.
Right. But let's take a trip back to 1990 and listen to what Siskel and Ebert had to say about this movie.
One of the intriguing things about Total Recall is that there's always the tantalizing possibility that everything in this movie is a dream. At one point, in fact, the doctor even seems to walk into Schwarzenegger's life and try to talk him out of his delusions, but are they delusions, or has this construction worker from Earth really been thrown into a revolutionary war on Mars? Is he a guy imagining things, or is he really a spy with a beautiful girlfriend? Total Recall is one of the most ambitious and offbeat science fiction movies in a long time, and Schwarzenegger's performance is an important part of the impact because he's not a Superman here, even though he does fight like one. He's a confused man who tries to handle a dangerous situation without knowing what's real and what's not, or what side he's really on. I liked it.
I liked the first hour a lot. The picture starts out and has some really fabulous special effects. There's a thing where they go through a scanning device, like going through an airport X-ray detector, and the whole body is X-rayed. And the way that special effect is done is exciting. Once he gets to the red planet, I think the picture starts to resemble itself all the way through, which is it real, is not real, and he's fighting this one guy. And for me, the back half of the picture broke down. I enjoyed thoroughly the beginning part. I wish they had come up, I don't know whether they need a third act or some kind of resolution, but as I was sitting there and watching...
Well, no, I enjoyed the second hour because I enjoyed, suddenly we got all these other supporting characters. For example, everyone in that last resort bar, you know,
the sex bar.
Turns out that all the prostitutes and bartenders are actually members of the Revolutionary Underground. And I also loved the look of the space station on Mars and the planet outside, although I must confess I was distracted several times by whatever rudimentary knowledge of science that I have, all of which was totally contradicted by this film. I mean, if you go in there and try to figure out what the scientific problems are with the plot, they're enormous.
Well, I think, would you agree that the setup of the picture is more interesting than the payoff?
No, I wouldn't.
The payoff, it doesn't really, you don't even know at the end, and we shouldn't give it, you don't know what the reality is at the end, and I don't think it really matters.
In other words, you don't know at the end if it's real or not?
The way he said...
But then in that case, the implication is there, even though I won't give it away.
What I'm saying is it doesn't make any difference which way they flipped it. It really wouldn't make any difference, and that's, I think, the weakness of the last half of the picture.
I don't think many people would.
All right, so they seem to like it, but they do have sort of their differences on sort of how the ending is perceived or whether the ending actually matters. And I sort of fall in that category, I guess. I don't really have a preference.
Yeah. I think critics, or at least Siskel and Ebert, crave resolution more than I do. Like,
yeah,
and maybe it's just because I have a good tolerance for abstract and, you know, things that are more on the artistic side, abstract side, I guess. I feel like I can appreciate the effort to go there, but I get it. Like when you're trying to review movies for the general public on the scale that these guys do, you know, they want to see something like fully resolve and wrap up and be like be able to comprehend exactly what's going on. And this one, it does push your limits of what is real and what's actually happening, and it has a couple curveballs throughout the course of the movie where you do get explanation of what's going on and questions get answered, but then they throw more questions in there and they try to tweak it again 3/4 of the way through by, you know, they talk about the guy comes in kind of later in the film to try to convince him that he's still in that room getting the implant or whatever, and you almost believe him, thinking like, you know, like it puts you in the same shoes as Arnold, as Quaid. So I like that your mind is getting messed with just like the main characters along the way, which is, you know, it's like being in a first person perspective with our protagonist.
Yeah, and the way it does sort of those curveballs, it makes it kind of like a roller coaster ride. You think, oh, it's finally being resolved, but then they throw you one other thing, and then you go on this other sort of adventure. So yeah, there isn't really resolution, but I would like to think, or sort of like, what would Siskel and Ebert think of Christopher Nolan's Inception if they had seen it when it came out?
Oh man,
You know?
Well, I think they would like the movie, but it'd be like this one. I think their review would be very similar. I think they'd talk about the end and say, there's a beautiful film, very thought provoking, blah blah blah. But then they'd probably criticize the fact that it doesn't end conclusively.
Yeah.
And I'm just basing that on after hearing this review.
Yeah. I've always liked movies that sort of leave you thought provoked,
Yeah.
Movies that you're still thinking about them a week or 2 weeks after you had seen them in theaters. That to me is like getting my money's worth, whether it's just like marinating in your brain, just constantly thinking about it in sort of good ways. It's not making you upset, but it's just like you're just going back and thinking about certain moments and what does this actually mean, or what were they trying to convey with that scene or that line of dialogue, So that's one of the things I like about this movie.
Yeah, I just watched Annihilation with Natalie Portman the other day.
Another one of those.
So I've seen it twice, once in the theater and then once the other day. And the end, I feel like it's open to your own interpretation of what happened at the end of that movie. It's just, I just don't, I don't know. I think there's probably two different ways you could look at it, but it's like, it's up to you as an individual to decide how you want that movie to end. And I think to write something like that, like I know that came from a book as well, but the complexities of these stories, like to be able to put the viewer in a position where they, in their mind, can decide how that story unfolds for them is so cool. There's something that's something that needs to be appreciated and acknowledged.
Definitely. But let's get into sort of the plot here. So basically, the movie opens up with Douglas Quaid, who is portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's kind of your average Joe construction worker, which is not your normal or typical role for Arnold Schwarzenegger. So at first, you're kind of surprised, like, okay, this isn't normal for this actor to be portraying this character, but sort of things get revealed and they're untangled, and before all that starts to kind of happen, he has sort of he kind of wants to go to Total Recall right after seeing a commercial on the train or the subway system.
He's got this like internal like something missing. He's like, again, like the Matrix, like Neo knows there's something wrong with the world, and it's just something that he can't explain. He just knows it's there. It's like Arnold has these dreams. He keeps having dreams of Mars and this girl, and it's always the same. It's like so real that it's like a memory, and he talks about like, I want to be somebody. I want more than this life. Like his life is great. They got an awesome place. Wife, good looking wife that he loves and all that, but feels that there's something missing. And so he wants to go to Recall to have these like awesome memories implanted in his head.
Now, basically, this is kind of like, what would you compare it to as far as, it's almost like, I don't know. It's like the next level above like TV and movies. Like the future is so far in advance that they can just give you these memories and sort of change your life so that you have these memories to live with.
They talk about traveling being riskier than recall. Right. So like, why risk crashing in a plane when you can just have these memories like implanted in your head, and then you'll just remember them like it actually happened. And then being able to add different things into it. I forget what they call it, but they pitch to Arnold the opportunity to add things like being a secret agent on your vacation or being someone else. Like these different packages, different levels of this product that they're offering the customers. So, and that's kind of what ends up happening to Quaid, is that he wants to be a secret agent or whatever, going to Mars, and I don't know if they really explain it, but they say he has some kind of some kind of an event in his brain that causes him to, like, I don't know, and some kind of episode, it like reactivates previous memories that he's had or something like that. I don't know. He wakes up from the procedure in a panic, thinking that somebody's and they have to sedate him and all of that. But so the recall process is a failure, and because of the event that happened there, they are so concerned to the extent that they send all the goons after him. Like Michael Ironside as Richter and all of his dudes. So Cohaagen, the big boss man, he sends everyone after Quaid to try to get him back under control. They don't want to kill him. They just want to get him under control and suppress the memories that he has of whatever it is that he's got against Cohaagen. And we've got a clip where, kind of a little bit ways down the road after some great action chase sequences, we get to a point in the movie where Quaid kind of discovers some things that he left himself, and it gives us a little bit more revealed where the plot and the direction of the movie is headed. So,
howdy, stranger. This is Hauser. If things have gone wrong, I'm talking to myself, and you've got a wet towel wrapped around your head. Now, whatever your name is, get ready for the big surprise. You are not you. You're me. No shit. All my life I worked for Mars Intelligence. I did Cohaagen's dirty work. But a few weeks ago I met somebody, a woman, and I learned a few things, like I've been playing for the wrong team. All I can do now is try to make up for it. See, there's enough shit in here to fuck Cohaagen good. Now, unfortunately, if you're listening to this, that means that he has got to me first. And here comes the hard part, old buddy. Now it is all up to you. Great. First, let's get rid of that bug in your head. Take this thing out of the case and stick it up your nose. Don't worry, it's self-guiding. Just shove real hard. When you hear the crunch, you're there. Just pull it out. Be careful. It's my head too. Now this is the plan. Get your ass to Mars. Then go to the Hilton and flash that Brubaker ID at the desk. That's all there's to it. Just do what I tell you, and we can nail that son of a bitch who fucked you and me. I'm counting on you, buddy. Don't let me down.
All right, so basically after this point in time, when he finally gets that tracking device out of his nose, he makes his way to Mars. It never actually shows him like flying to Mars or anything like that. He just sort of arrives.
How about how that tracking device is like encased in a sphere that's like the size of a golf ball?
Yeah, it's massive.
Pulling that thing out of his nose.
The practical effects on that scene, and I guess the dream sequence at the beginning of the movie when him and Melina are on Mars, and even at the end of the movie with Cohaagen, those practical effects with the bulging eyes are incredible.
They're crazy.
Yeah.
It's unsettling. It's not even to the point where you're like, oh, that's fake. It's like, like, ew, wow. It's crazy. Yeah, especially the Mars scene in the dream in the beginning when, their helmets get exposed or whatever. And there's some pretty gnarly stuff in there. We'll get into that more too. So, but what did you make of I really liked this scene. I liked how they're and we cut some of the chase stuff out of there because while he's watching all of this stuff, Richter is on the prowl. He's tracking him on that device, and they're closing in on him. So it's a suspenseful situation. You realize we're getting all this great plot information, but time is limited. So we might not get all the information that we need to know to see kind of what's going to happen and why is all of this stuff happening. So they do a great job of creating that roller coaster ride effect throughout this sequence.
Yeah, they sort of reveal just enough information as the story kind of progressive.
Yeah.
For us to kind of just get a little bit of a taste, but there's still sort of like a mystery shrouding Cohagen and Mars and what's actually going down there. And even when you get to Mars, you're sort of fed a little bit about the rebels and whatnot. But this scene, just the way they sort of utilize Hauser and Quaid as sort of two characters played by the same actor, from previous points in time before Hauser got his mind wiped. I don't know. I feel like it's a great way to sort of, just make things a little more interesting than it could have been just something really straightforward, streamlined, like something out of a James Bond movie. But it does a little bit more and just really dives deeper into just the sci-fi genre, doing it this way.
I just love the way that Hauser just appears to be so clever. He's got this whole briefcase full of stuff, this contingency plan. It's all set out for Quaid. He knows that if something happens, then I've got this plan that's going to help himself kind of come back into his consciousness and his memories, and maybe he never really remembers everything from before. I don't think he ever does, but he does enough to point him in the right direction to get him back to his old friends on Mars and back over to being one of the good guys and take it from there. So it's cool. I dig it. And when he does go to Mars, we meet Melina, played by Rachel Ticotin. I don't know how you pronounce that name, but watching this movie was looking at her why does she look so familiar? And we talk about Paul Verhoeven having a lot of these familiar faces like Michael Ironside in Starship Troopers, or Dean Norris, who was, I think, also a general or colonel or something in Starship Troopers, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
Dean Norris from, we know him probably, at least I do, mostly from Breaking Bad. But Rachel, or Melina, the character name, was also the female guard on the airplane in Con Air.
Oh, yeah. That is her, isn't it?
Guard Sally Bishop.
Right.
So, like many times on the Abominations podcast, we come full circle with one of our previous classic films.
6 Degrees of Abominations in Technicolor.
6 Degrees of Abomination. But yeah, I mean, and I think from there we get kind of the process of getting more familiar with the villain, good guys versus bad guys, a lot of action, a lot of chasing, kind of unraveling the different characters and motives of why Cohaagen is such a bad guy and what he's trying to do and all of that, why he's trying to get to Quaid. And I don't know, I kind of agree with Siskel and Ebert in that the end was somewhat unsatisfying for me, at least. I just feel
I would
like
agree. Yeah.
it leads to this, this unknown destination where we're supposed to get to. And I don't know. I just feel like it wasn't quite as satisfying as I thought it was going to be, but the good guy wins. So I don't know.
Yeah, the ending is a little bit lackluster, but sort of and I sort of view maybe after the first half hour, this whole movie is basically a massive foot chase.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of chasing
before he
in
even
this movie.
Gets on Mars. I feel like the whole time Richter and his goons are just chasing after Douglas Quaid.
Constantly.
Whether it's by the subway system or once they finally all get to Mars, it's just one big massive foot chase.
It is. Too much. I think actually too much.
Yeah, it's
chasing.
like constantly just these guys running through through corridors. And I mean, the set design is cool, but I feel like just the kind of it feels a little bit small in terms of sure, you have some cool shots of Mars, but just the kind of what would you call it? The base on Mars, it just feels small, I guess.
It does, yeah.
Like a set.
And I would understand, just because without having oxygen, you can't create this wide open space. Everything would probably need to be very small and contained. I think it gets a little bit bigger in that scene where they have to jump and dangle from the rafters or whatever, and Richter and his goon, I don't know which one it was, but they're about to shoot the glass, and he tells them not to shoot because they would expose the complex. They'd lose the oxygen, obviously, but that was pretty neat, that scene. I like that part.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels too much at times, kind of like a set. Especially, nowadays you have Ridley Scott's The Martian with Matt Damon, and just seeing how they can film that in Saudi Arabia and make it look actually like Mars. And then going back to watching something like this. And it wasn't even the exterior shots that really bothered me. It just, I don't know. It's all the foot chasing and sort of just the sets. It just felt too much like something that was fabricated on a Hollywood lot, I guess. But I do really like sort of the sets on Earth where it's it's, I guess it's Douglas Quaid getting chased at first after he leaves his apartment. Just that whole set design with the concrete, walls and structures. I thought that looked really interesting. And I actually saw that was filmed in Mexico City, by their subway system. So that's actually a real place you can go visit. It wasn't something that they built just for the movie. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that whole sequence kind of reminded me of Minority Report, just the way that Tom Cruise is trying to escape the people coming after him, and he's getting kind of the way that Arnold gets scanned in that X-ray machine, in Minority Report. Tom Cruise is going through the retinal scans where they scan his eyes. Certain little beats like that are somewhat parallel, I guess, and even cooler to now realize that their original stories were written by the same author. So it's kind of a interesting revelation.
Yeah, that Minority Report is definitely another underrated sci-fi movie. Not enough people talk about that one.
But after the break, we're going to get into some of the cast and some of the actors that we see in this film a little bit deeper. And then also want to get into the wonderful special effects and action of Total Recall. So we'll be right back.
Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/abominations and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/abominations and get started today.
All right, we're back. So one thing that we came across when looking into this film, just kind of doing our pre-episode research, is that this film took a while to get made. Oftentimes in Hollywood, they green light a project, and in the process of it, they have changes. Things come up and stuff happens. And this one was originally going to be directed by David Cronenberg, who is a bit of a master of like creatures and practical effects and did a lot of work on sci-fi projects over his career, but eventually was replaced by Paul Verhoeven. And with that also came some changes with the casting process. So I was entertained to find that when David Cronenberg was going to do this film, he had William Hurt in mind for the role of Quaid.
Wow.
And we talked about William Hurt quite a bit in our episode for The Village. And he definitely is a top-notch prospect of an actor. I mean, if you're going to have someone, I think that maybe could have worked well. It's hard to imagine anyone's face on the poster of Total Recall than Arnold.
Yeah.
But we'll never know what that movie would have been like. But otherwise, with Paul Verhoeven involved, we even had other actors, if you can imagine, that he preferred to Arnold. Number one on the list, ironically, in my opinion, Richard Dreyfuss.
I can't imagine that one bit. I mean, I love Richard Dreyfuss, and Close Encounters is one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time, but I can't see him in this version of Total Recall where it's sort of this macho sci-fi movie. I don't know. I can't see him in that role as Douglas Quaid. I don't know.
Well, I guess the story or the book, the Philip K. Dick written version of this story, the character Quaid, I think his name was Quail or something, just a minor difference in the name, but in the story he was had an office job. So I wonder if had they casted Richard Dreyfuss, if they would have had him just be a white collar office job, not a construction worker like Arnold ended up being in the final version. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that maybe could have been a detail that they would have tweaked based on the casting choice. Maybe.
All right.
But aside from our first choice of Richard Dreyfuss, the second choice, runner-up, was Patrick Swayze.
Wow.
Mr. Roadhouse himself.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
Who'd been Dirty Dancing with Rachel Ticotin.
I could see Patrick
Melina.
Swayze.
Yeah.
I could see it.
Yeah. I think that could have worked. I think that would have been much better than Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah. But I feel like the casting of Arnold, which Paul Verhoeven, they originally wanted Arnold for RoboCop, but he thought it would be too similar to Terminator, so he turned it down. But casting Arnold, it puts like this, I don't know, it puts it in this other category of just like, it puts the movie on another level, you know, just this Hollywood blockbuster that it's like, if you had somebody else, it would just be sort of like a B movie sci-fi flick, you know. I don't know.
Right.
Getting Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1990 for this movie is like, it just puts it on people's like most anticipated movies of that year.
Yeah. And I think it's something where I feel like you got to be willing to take a risk or at least be careful, like do those things simultaneously. Because Arnold, I mean, I think just his chops as far as delivering dialogue and being like a believable, like he's not your normal average guy. He's not like he's his own Hollywood superstar entity. Like whatever you put him in, he's not gonna fit every role. He's not average Joe. You can't just like throw him in and expect him to relate to every type of character on the page. So I think for this movie, like, yes, he elevates it just with his own personal like action hero star power, but at the same time, like, the complexity of this plot and the necessity for the character to be able to do all these things as far as explaining the complex elements of the story, that I think Arnold is even somewhat of a risky choice because of that. So I guess kudos to the way that they were able to throw him in there, elevate this movie to be a big blockbuster sci-fi action flick, but yet still be able to not fall short on the elements where they're trying to explain these really complex ideas and plot elements and not kind of let that all get buried underneath the magnitude of action and special effects that they're trying to throw at you.
Yeah, like Arnold's not I mean, even going back to 1990, he's not the person I would have, if I was a studio exec at that point in time, I don't know if he's the guy that I would have chosen to star in this movie.
Right.
You know, I can't really think of somebody who could, I don't know if I would have gone someone who could act a little bit more, some better acting chops. I mean, I would say Patrick Swayze was more probably of that type of actor for that role, or I mean, definitely Richard Dreyfuss. But
yeah,
I don't know. It's a very fine balance because you're casting Arnold because you want the action machismo. You know that's what you're sort of the tone you're really bringing to this movie when you cast this guy. But if you had this movie come out in 2019 and you had The Rock starring as Douglas Quaid, I think this movie would flop super hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of these, and maybe just because the remake, like, you have to be careful with the remake. You have to take special care. You gotta nurture it.
Well, I just mean if this movie had never come out in 1990
if it had never been made.
Yeah, and it came out in 2019, I think it would flop. I think there was just sort of a perfect storm with, and I'm not trying to say this is the greatest movie ever made,
right?
But just a perfect storm in terms of the cast and the story and the premise, and I don't know. It's just kind of a great blending of tones.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we talked about it at the beginning of the episode that it kind of has its own signature concept or its own signature stamp on the sci-fi, on the history of science fiction movies. It's not the movie that's going to be compared to other movies. It's going to be the movie that other movies are comparing to it. So I would agree. I think it's it was, I don't know, it was maybe one where Arnold doing it set a standard of like, these big action heroes can do these movies like Blade Runner. Like, I don't think when Blade Runner was made that, I don't know, what stage of Harrison Ford's career you think, when did Blade Runner come out?
Well, it came out in 81, so Star Wars,
4 years after Star Wars or something.
Empire Strikes Back had already been out, so he was really popular.
Very popular.
I don't remember the year Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. It might have been 82. I don't know. It came out right around there.
And I think this is kind of parallel to 81. That. I think getting Arnold and a big star, it's something that you can do to really make sure that the general public will be okay with digesting something that's very ambitious and abstract and sci-fi, like, to the fullest. You know what I mean? Versus having someone maybe unknown, it could kind of get lost in the wash.
Yeah, and we haven't even really touched on sort of the wacky side of this movie. Not only does it have kind of a heady sort of sci-fi concept, it really delivers some just crazy visuals. So you have sort of these mutants on Mars, like we mentioned sort of earlier, the lady with 3 boobs, and Hank from Breaking Bad, his character sort of has this kind of like mutated like pink face, and there's all these weird characters.
You've got Benny in there, the cab driver, who ends up kind of being inside, like an insider for Cohaagen. You know, our 2 characters, Quaid and Molina, trust that Benny's leading them in the right direction, helping them escape from the goons, but later he ends up double crossing them and revealing that he's a mutant with like a weird, like 2-fingered ET hand. And and he's on Cohaagen's side, working for Cohaagen.
Yeah, and it all leads to Kuato. So Kuato's leading this sort of rebellion, and sort of throughout the film, you're thinking the leader Kuato, he must be this like great human being leading all these people on Mars to sort of rebel against Cohaagen and his forces.
Right. Yeah.
When in actuality, he's a mutant, like Siamese twin type guy on somebody's like stomach and chest. It's just nuts, man. Like, my wife was watching it sort of, well, I had it on and she was like doing other stuff, and she would just look up at the movie every once in a while. She's just like, this movie is so weird, especially when it got to Kuato, when he's just like, open your mind.
Yep. Played by Marshall Bell, who was also in Starship Troopers.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently Paul Verhoeven
he's the guy that he's like on the video when they first encounter everyone who first, like all the people who died from the brain bug at one of the bases.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in that.
It's amazing how many, you know, how he tends to work with the same people. And I mean, it's not uncommon in Hollywood, but interesting and entertaining to kind of see these actors shared in so many of his movies.
Yeah. But let's sort of transfer on to just special effects and violence. Now, I have seen this maybe a handful of times throughout the last 5 years or so, but upon this latest rewatch, this movie is so violent, and I can't, like, I tried to look up how many people die in this movie, but it's got to be close to 100.
Yeah, like it's pushing John Wick territory here.
Yeah, it really is. There's one point where Quaid is being chased on foot by Richter and his guys, and they're on an escalator. And Quaid grabs a guy and uses him as like a human shield. And I just thought it was completely hilarious. And this movie has sort of like, it uses violence in a way that's almost like comedic, you know? I mean, that's not a necessary scene to have, but like it just adds a lot of value. And I loved that part where Quaid uses that guy as a shield. And there's other moments like that, and where Richter's, they're on the elevator sort of at the end of the movie, and you know, it sort of cuts off Richter's arms.
Yeah, he holds his arms down, and then
see you at the party, Richter.
Right. What does he do with the arms?
I think he just throws them.
He's holding them and he gets up. Yeah, I think he just throws them aside or something like that.
Yeah.
That was one of my more favorite parts, I think. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, pretty violent.
Crazy. What about one of the cool, I don't know, I guess define cool, but one of the scenes that was pretty crazy was when Quaid arrives at Mars and Richter's there with his guys. They're all looking around to try to figure out where's Quaid, you know, and there's this awkward, large-sized lady.
Oh, yes.
She's like, what is he coming through kind of like the checkpoint?
Yeah.
And I forget what she says, but she keeps repeating something, or I can't remember how that all goes down, but whatever that suit is that Quaid's wearing, it starts like malfunctioning and starts stuttering and stuff like that and acting up. And then Richter's like, it's Quaid. Stop him.
I have the clip here. I'm going to play it for us all.
Oh, I love it.
So how long do you plan to stay on Mars?
2 weeks.
Have you brought any fruits or vegetables onto the planet?
2 weeks.
Excuse me?
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Things are getting hotter each night. Hell forbidden going out. And it gets worse. The rebels are... Boy, there's no much good.
Oh, man.
It's Quaid.
Yeah. Get him. Yeah, I didn't know what the hell was going on in that scene. I was like, this lady's like, what's about to happen? And then, I mean, after about 5 or 10 seconds, you kind of know, like, oh, he must be doing like a Harry Potter, whatever that juice is or whatever they eat to transform into other people. But it's pretty cool, like the way that her head kind of splits open in layers, like the way it does, and then you see Quaid underneath, and it even was like maybe a wax molding of his face at first. It's just kind of the way they did that special effect. It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's not quite Arnold.
No, it was like, I don't know if it was animatronic or just a wax like statue of his head, but it definitely wasn't him.
For sure.
But yeah, they never sort of give you any indication like prior to that scene that he has like this sort of like suit or capability of.
Right.
I don't know. It's just weird. He just shows up in like, in an outfit or like a robotic lady. I don't know. It's just bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it was interesting. You got to watch it. You're lucky. I just had to listen to it, but definitely one of the most obscure moments of the movie. And then after that, you get a nice chase sequence.
Oh yeah, the movie's plentiful with the chase scenes.
But I read that the film was originally going to get an X rating, and they had to actually cut some violent sequences or violent moments from the film in order to get it in line with an R rating so that it didn't bomb at the box office. But it'd be interesting to see the original cut. You'd think now there might be like a director's cut out there or something like that.
Yeah, that I mean, I don't know what else they could have had in the movie for it to be X-rated. I mean, I know like movies can just be X-rated with just violence, but like what specifically was it that sort of put it over the edge?
Yeah.
You know, whether it's
I'm pretty sure that and don't quote me on this because this is speculation, but I would like to think that maybe the sequence with the bar or wherever on Mars, that the girl actually had 4 boobs, and they said,
yeah,
you know what, Paul, you're gonna have to cut that down to 3. Because if you go 4, we're going to give you an X rating. But if you go 3 boobs, then we'll drop it down to an R for you. What do you think?
Oh, that's good.
That'd be my guess.
I'm gonna believe that from this point on.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing as the brain bug in Starship Troopers. They're like, well, if you make the brain bug look like a big dick, then you'll get an X rating. But if you make it look like a vagina, then we'll give you an R.
Right.
Again, speculation.
There's probably one of the worst on-screen kiss scenes in this movie. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Oh, man. No.
It's the first scene that Richter's introduced, and he enters Quaid and Laurie, played by Sharon Stone's, apartment after Laurie sort of turns and tries to kill Quaid in their apartment. And Richter lays one on Laurie, and it's just one of the grossest like on-screen kisses I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the villain. Back in the day, too, they really used to get right in there. Like the actors, like you watch like Harrison Ford kiss a woman, and he just like feel like he just buries his tongue in there, you know. You're really just eating their face off, you know.
Yeah,
but Michael Ironside, you see a villain do it, and I would agree. He's getting right in there.
Yeah, it just grossed me out. But is there any other things about Total Recall that you want to talk about?
Man, I don't know. Did you think that the what is it, a Johnny Cab or the Jimmy Cab, whatever, the robot cab driver? Did you think he looked like what's that guy's name? Is it Don Knotts? Is that the guy from the Andy Griffith Show? Is that guy's name? Can't remember.
Oh, it does look like him. Yeah, Don Knotts.
I really think that maybe they based that cab driver after him, but that's just my guess.
It does look a lot like him.
But aside from that, I don't think I had anything else. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was nice to, I don't know, some of these movies when you watch them as a kid and you don't get to watch the whole thing, or you don't absorb the whole thing, and then you don't watch them until years and years later. Sometimes it's disappointing. Like you watch a movie and it's like, that's not as good as I remember it, or my vague memory of what that was better than, now it's like a disappointment to watch it. But I had a pretty good amount of fun with this one. I thought the action was good. The cheesy special effects actually kind of hold up because that's just kind of what they're there for. It's not one where you're like, it's not ruined by the time that's passed and now the Ultra HD effects that we get now. It's not ruined by that, because this is Total Recall in its glory. So I really enjoyed it. And, another Paul Verhoeven movie, check that box. We're 2 down at this point. So who knows? Maybe we'll do another one in the future.
Yeah, I thought this movie was a blast. It just has like this nice cadence and pace to it. Even though a lot of it is just foot chases. But
yeah,
I just think it delivers sort of the sci-fi heady concepts, the cheesiness, the Arnold machismo. I feel like it has a nice overall package. But yeah, I'll always love watching Total Recall. So I'd be curious. What?
It made me want to watch The Running Man.
Ooh, yeah, I'll have to do that. But if you guys want to email us, you can email us a suggestion or just your thoughts on a movie we've talked about, just at abominationspod@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail for free at 616-594-0764. Adam, what do we got scheduled for next week?
Oh, next week we are going to go back, not quite as far as Total Recall, but we're going to go back to 2002 and we're going to tackle Equilibrium. So this one I think has been overlooked over time significantly. So if any of you want to catch Equilibrium prior to our episode, I believe it's available for free on one of our services. What was it, Hulu?
Yeah, it's on Hulu right now, so that's where we're gonna watch it.
So get ready for next week. We'll see you back in 2002.
All right, for Adam and myself, we'll see you next week.